This is Space Cat's Peace Turtles, the unofficial podcast for Fantasy Flight's Twilight Imperium.
Episode 115.
The absolutely real, super important, 100% 2019 huge SCPT faction tier list. Leave your disagreements at the door. Hashtag nailed it.
Music by Ben Prunty, featuring Matt Martins and Hunter Donaldson.
Matt, let's start with, how was 2019 as a year for you? Was it good? Was it
2019?
neat?
Okay, do you remember last year at the end of 2018?
Yeah.
Everybody was like, worst year ever. And like 2017, everybody did the same thing. And 2016, everybody did the same. Like for 3 years in a row, it was just like nothing can get worse than this year. No. 2019 broke the cycle.
2019
was a good year.
It was
First
fun.
off, a lot of good movies in 2019.
Yep.
Lot.
Well, we're not allowed to talk about that
No,
yet.
I know,
We might
that's a
be.
different thing. But I'm just saying, good movies to watch. We had a great year. We had a fun year.
I mean, I do want to say, for the record, it was a baller year
Yeah.
for movies.
Yeah.
And I ain't even seen all of them yet. Uncut Gems, I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
When am I going to get you in me?
I still haven't even seen Knives Out, and that's going to be just like absolutely my jam.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, that definitely seems like your type of movie.
I'm just excited that 2020 is a new decade and that we get to pretend like nothing else has existed before it. Because as soon as you're in a new decade, it's just like a whole thing of like, well, this is a new decade, so
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And for you and
All
I
bets are
specifically, we're in that age group of like the new decade is also a new like I turned 30 tomorrow.
Yeah.
Not at I'm already 30 now when you've heard this.
No, but we're
recording the day of my birthday party, and then tomorrow I turn 30, and I'm having a birthday party.
What are we doing for your birthday? Tell
We're doing a
everybody.
Hot Ones challenge. If you've never watched the show Hot Ones, it's the best show on YouTube, and they interview celebrities and make them eat progressively spicier and spicier wings. So I'm going to hurt all my friends. I'm hurting all my friends by making them eat incredibly spicy hot wings.
And, like, yeah, that sounds like a playful idea or whatever. But I do, like, it is going to be weird. And my prediction is that someone is actually going to get upset and or annoyed. And my second prediction, it's probably going to be me.
It's probably going to be you, and I hope that one person throws up.
Yeah,
I
somebody.
hope one person, like
definitely gonna
EJ,
throw
I
up.
hope EJ pushes himself too far because he's got a competitive nature, and he's going to throw up.
God, I hope you all have enjoyed the steady stream of actual live in-person video content because I am so much going to miss I've been in
here.
Arkansas basically for the entire month of December, and we got to play so many games in the flesh, not over TTS, and I miss it. I probably need to move home.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
That's what you want. You're down with that. But yeah, so what do we got today? What are we going to do today, Matt?
Well, today, as the very long intro indicated, we've got to do the absolutely real, super important 100% 2019 huge SCPT faction tier list. Leave your disagreements at the door.
Hashtag nailed it.
Yeah. So we're doing that. That's the important thing we do at the end of every year or the start of every year. What exact day does this episode come out? We're already in 2020.
Well, we're not, but
But we are.
Well, how about this? I welcome you to 2020.
Welcome to 2020.
And me and Matt went into
not
the
ready
future.
either?
No. We prepared it for you.
Yes.
Just so you know,
Right.
we got it ready for you. Here's your 2020. We made this for you.
Yeah.
And part of us making the new year and the new decade, when we just got it started, we didn't finish it, but is giving you an update on where exactly every faction in Twilight Imperium is on the competitive tier list.
Yep.
Now, a lot of people are going to listen to this and they're going to think like, oh, cool, I should like put in my opinion, and they're wrong about this. Well,
no.
that's where you'd be wrong.
Yeah.
We, hashtag nailed it, just like the action card episode. I'm bringing this one back.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite bits.
Good bit.
So yeah, this one's all good. No worries.
So now we present it to you. You're welcome.
Yeah, you are welcome. Obviously, for those of you that don't understand sarcasm or jokes, I am joking. If you disagree, let us know. We always love that.
Yeah.
We want to talk about
But
it.
we won't take your opinions especially seriously with this one. We'll
Well,
hear
it's
them.
just-
We'll hear them, and we will put them on the show. But also, we won't agree with them probably
Right, and
because
also
we've already done it.
Yeah.
we've already nailed.
Oh, well, let's talk a little bit. Let's let them see how the sausage is made.
Yeah.
Because this is 100%.
We already did the goose thing, so they get how the sausage. Sausage is
right,
made.
and no more meat talk for a little while. But how did we make? What was our deeply scientific process in making this for sure?
Well,
correct
the important
tier list?
the first step was we did have actually a criteria, which the criteria for this year was it is meant to be a competitive tier list, whereas maybe previous years were just like for general playing or like for fun. What's the most fun faction to play? This is we are assuming all 6 players at the table are playing a 10-point game, and they are all very, very good. Every game is a finals game level of all the players.
Right.
So how do the factions stack up against that?
Yeah.
And then Hunter and I, within 5 minutes, both farted out a list,
Mm-hmm.
and then we punched our lists together and talked for a little bit, and
Right.
then this is what we came up with.
There were compromises. There were disagreements. I went the wrong way with some Barony and L1 stuff, and Matt set me right.
I was a little harsh on X-Chai at one point, and we
Yep.
brought him back a
Yep.
little bit. I
Yep.
threw a chair again. God,
Yep.
confound it.
Yep.
If you wouldn't believe it, I just
We're
can't
sitting
keep that
on
temper.
2 very broken chairs because that's what Matt does. But yeah, do we want to start? We want to go for
Are we
it?
gonna start from the top or from the bottom? What's like more dramatic?
I think starting.
Neither of the bookends of this list are dramatic.
Yeah.
A faction list is never dramatic on the front and the back end because everybody knows what the good and bad factions are.
Well, we can't start in the middle because that's insane.
Well, I don't know.
I won't do it. No, I won't do it. How about this? We'll give you the tiers first.
Yeah, sure.
Just how many tiers we made. There is I'm going to call it double S tier.
Yeah.
Which we've labeled as the factions that have obvious victory tools. These are tools that are just almost always going to lead to victory or give them some sort of chance always. Okay. We have a S tier, one S tier, which you wrote synchrony.
Well,
what does that mean?
It's A tier is natural objective advantages.
Yeah.
Right? And this S tier fits between the obvious victory tools and the natural objective advantages.
All right. How about instead of synchrony, we call it synchronicity by the police.
Synchronous with me.
Whoa, that was a weird pull. B tier. We have a B tier, which we've labeled just reliable abilities. Right. They have abilities. They don't always lead to victory.
But in
good
players' hands, you're going to do well with them, and you can find victory.
But I will say this. They all feel they're like good, but like a little bit out of sync with the end state of a high-level play game. Right. C tier, this is C tier part 1, I should say. Yeah. Is called Underdogs. This is the really exciting tier, I think. And then C tier part 2, which we've just labeled, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
This is for factions that we feel like should do better in high level play, and they don't, and we don't exactly know why.
Yeah.
Like we're and we have ideas as to
and
why.
Underdogs is almost the opposite. So really, we had a big C tier list, and we were looking at the C tier list and going, there's 2 different stories being told here, and they don't make sense to put together. But also, because it's such a swinging group, I can't say that one is better than the other. So the Underdogs are bad factions that do well, and the Something's Wrong factions are good factions that don't do well in competitive play.
Right.
And those 2 things are not necessary. I don't know which one wins more often.
Right.
I mean, we kind of know which a couple of them win more often, but even then, it's not a reliable information.
Yeah. And then our final tier is the F tier. These are factions that we consider have a major hurdle towards them having any success. Obviously, any faction can win a game of Twilight Imperium for sure. Outside of maybe one. But all 16 of the other factions have a shot.
Yeah.
But these are just factions that we think the hurdle is major.
Right. If you overcome that hurdle,
then things
maybe
change.
you can win, and that's a great thing. But it is a requirement to succeed within. Let's start back up at the top.
Yeah.
I want to talk about double S tier.
Double S tier.
This is like a Japanese fighting game.
Sure.
Double S tier, Ultra Turbo Max.
The turbo tier, SS Turbo. One thing I want to say is also that we loosely ranked within the tiers. So we're gonna give them to you in the list that we consider, like we consider this one 1, 2, 3.
Don't take that crazy seriously. Obviously,
no. How about you do? How about you do take it crazy serious?
Very definitive. We nailed
that
it.
Way,
shut up.
Yeah.
Shut up.
No, don't yell at them.
Sorry.
But I do think it would be fun. If you have. I like doing this bit where we pretend we don't want any feedback, but I also do want feedback.
Specifically want the
feedback.
And
if you want to tell us why these next 3 factions in
Are
the double S
barely
tier
different from each other.
But even
Yeah, sure.
those arguments,
Plead the case.
Yeah, of course.
Well, at the top is the winner of last year's SCPT Patreon tournament,
the Nalu.
the Nalu Collective. And it's not just because they won last year's tournament. It is because the Nalu...
Although that helped.
That certainly helps. And it helped prove the point of when everything else is even, when it's a top-tier level play, and everyone is perfectly competitive, Nalu's advantage is obvious.
Yeah.
Nalu just will then get to win the game because of the initiative advantage.
I think the 0 token is the best ability in the game.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I mean, last year's finals game, was a 12.5-hour-long slog of 6 players that perfectly knew how to thwart each other at every point, and the main reason Nine of Spades pulled out, and he had great play. I'm not discrediting Nine of Spades' brilliance. He did amazing stuff. But at the end of the day, lots of players had a chance to win in the end, and Nalu is in the prime position to always make that happen.
Yeah. Speaking of the finals, go watch that on YouTube.
Yeah.
But also, somebody watched that for the first time yesterday
really?
and commented and was like, "Yeah, this was fun and good, and there was a lot of that I liked about it. It's really long, though. It's really, really long."
I just want to be clear. I don't have control over that.
Right. But also, you should expect there will be long games in the tournament this year.
Sure. I won't be surprised if this year's finals are equally long.
Yeah.
Our format kind of necessitates long games. I mean, the moderating slows things down, and
right.
I will hold to that.
I am thinking about, honestly, from this guy's comment the other day, this person's comment, I should say, I have no idea, but I think splitting the finals this year into 2 separate days might be smart. I know I'm just throwing this at you all of a sudden in the middle of an episode.
I'm about to throw this chair.
I really think that would be, think about it. The finals, we do the first 3 or 4 rounds. We stop. We meet.
Go ahead and
back up.
send us your errata on this new idea Hunter's giving me.
Imagine that though. You're in the middle of this
event.
high level game,
Maybe.
and you get to go to sleep and think about it and come back into the mid game with a fresh mind.
You freaked me out.
Yeah.
But...
Anyways, sorry. It's just, this is a freewheeling episode.
Yeah. Next up is the next best obvious victory tool, which is the Clan of Sar.
Right.
It literally does just come down to the fact that their home system doesn't matter. So you can't, if they get the ball rolling, which a good player will,
right,
there's nothing you can do to stop them. If they are heading for victory, you have no tools at your disposal to thwart that.
Yeah, their economy plastic advantage is literally unmatchable.
Yeah.
There's no way for you to have more stuff,
right?
Basically.
Now, a bad SAR, I think there's going to be plenty of complaints about but SAR can, there's certain scenarios where SAR pushes too hard in the early game. That's a fear with a lot of tables where SAR is more just a nuisance than they are great at the game, right? In the first 2 rounds, they try to swallow up someone's slice, and then things maybe fall apart because they get too much heat. That's true, but a good SAR doesn't fall into those traps. A good SAR plays just as steady and only incurs all of that plastic advantage, and then in the end has chaos mapping, has stuff parked in an asteroid field that you are not allowed to touch, and their home system doesn't matter. And what do you do? That's always the question at the end. Is what are we even supposed to do to stop SAR?
I think it goes. I think a lot of people that are really competitive with Twilight Imperium would probably agree that most of the time SAR is just not allowed to be played.
Exactly.
Basically, nobody wants to play with them because they are so. It's not even that. So they have all these obvious advantages, right? But then there's all the weird stuff you can do that borderline feels like you're breaking the game,
right?
And not
absolutely things
like the SAR space dock stealth bomber stuff.
Yeah,
I'll never forget
just
that.
Avoid PDS fire. Just don't even have to worry about it, and just drop ground forces on a planet without incurring anything.
Insane.
Yeah.
And just to call out, we haven't talked about this guy in this game in a really long time, but Gen Con Joey's game in 2018 was some of the wildest stuff I've ever seen in Twilight Imperium.
Yeah.
And it was all just SAR with... It was like SAR with light wave deflector, and it was space docks that could invade any home system without and just bypass everyone's defenses. Right. It was completely wild.
Madness. A SAR on unhinged is the scariest thing at the table.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have 3 factions in the double S tier. The last one is You predicted it. It's Jolnar.
Jolnar.
Jolnar is something I wouldn't mind putting in a lower tier because the difference with Nalu and Sar is the two tools they have, the 0 initiative and they don't lose, they can claim points without their home system. Those are obvious victory tools.
Yep.
Jolnar's obvious victory tool is the accumulation of everything.
Yeah.
It's E-Res Siphons is the biggest one, and I'll plead that case, which is just that in an endgame scenario, Jolnar has E-Res Siphons, and you have to decide between trying to take their home system and giving them 4 trade goods, which, turns out is going to lock in 16 resources for them. So then if you fail to take the home system, or if they manage to take it back, you've only given them the win. There's so many times where that's a thing, where you have this like catch-22 with Jolnar of what are you supposed to do now? We've already let it get out of hand.
Right.
Or they've got the 2 tech and 4 colors locked in, and nobody else is even close.
Yep. It's just all the raw components of the game. It's tech, it's money, it's plastic, it's all the things basically. With their only disadvantage being, their dudes are bad.
Right.
Like they're
actual infantry.
They're bros.
Everything shoots worse, but I will say the biggest thing that knocks Jolnar for me that I think is a genuine hurdle that has to be overcome is that bad infantry.
That's what I'm talking
suck
about.
At ground combat.
Yeah, I'm talking about their dudes.
So that's the one thing that like makes me nervous to put them in double S tier, but we just see it too often.
No,
but
smart players can get around
Smart
it.
players know how to deal with that, and so it is a non-issue.
Yeah. And then that is the end of our double S tier HD Turbo remix. Now we have just a single S tier. Which we just labeled synchronicity, synchronicity by the police, and that only has one faction in this tier, and that is Seoul.
Right.
Because Seoul, it feels like has gotten a bit of a demotion over this year.
I wanted to put Seoul in the A tier. I kind of wanted to like stick it to Seoul. But when we talked beforehand, like they obviously still have amazing great things that keep them in contention pretty much in every single game they're in.
But they're not the thing that separates Seoul from these other 3 factions that we've already talked about is that there are Achilles heels to it. It's essentially they have a lot of advantages that are all very good, but they are not like unstoppable.
Right.
Whereas these other 3 factions that we've already talked about, their advantages are just difficult to get around.
Right.
Like it's a Jolnar with E-Res Siphons, it's hard to it's hard to avoid giving them all of the stuff that they're going to get. Right. You just kind of you're like, well, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Nalu with the 0, it's like, well, we can't get around that aspect. The fact that SAR doesn't care if you take their home system, these are things that you can't do anything about. Right. Whereas Seoul has great advantages, but if we play right, they can be dealt with.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very hard to deal with it.
Yeah.
But it absolutely can be dealt with.
Right. And it feels like their advantages still lean further than our A-tier factions, although our A-tier factions are pretty good. Yeah. So, if I would say if somebody puts in an errata saying like, well, Seoul should just be in the A tier or like maybe even lower. I hear you. I'm not, but we did #nail it.
Let's do our A tier, which is our natural objective advantages, right? These are all factions that they don't have this like ridiculously clutch tool, but they're just good at doing the things that you're supposed to do in Twilight Imperium.
Right.
And by that I mean very different from factions where you are accomplishing all the things, but you are kind of stretching yourself to do it. These factions, none of these factions have to stretch to accomplish objectives. You just kind of do them.
Right.
And at the top of that, we have put Necro, which if you'd asked us a year and a half ago, is Necro a top tier faction? I don't think we felt this way at all. But we've just started to see that the plastic economy, the things you can do with them, the way you manipulate Necro is such a big deal that you turn them so intensely into an A tier faction.
Yeah, I think it really just comes down to there has been like a sea change in like how people play Necro, and I mean I'm going to throw a lot of credit towards Magi basically for kind of being like this is the style of Necro, but it's not just Magi. Right. We see people play this way all the time with Necro now, where there's kind of the economy of the faction has been like optimized, essentially. Right.
Well, and it took a few players pushing that idea of like breaking down those economies to really get our heads wrapped around like what makes Necro so good. It's kind of the same thing that happened with me with Seoul at the very beginning of the game. With Seoul, it was like, well, they look like they have good stuff, but I don't know what makes them like a perfect, amazing faction. But then you see what it takes to win games, the things, the resources you are supposed to have, and then you get to look at it again and go, oh, Seoul has all of that.
Right.
Necro feels the same way, where it's like the things you need to do to be able to win the game, Necro has that. Necro has fighter screens that are ground forces that don't have to sit like they. Oh, you just put your flagship down and you have this ridiculous screen. They can just turn. They don't need influence as much as anybody else, so they get to ignore an entire component of the game if they want to. They can
their
just
command
focus
counter
on
economy,
resources.
the fact that they can focus on resources and their command counter economy never gets in their way.
Yep.
While at the same time, they can, if they're smart, research more tech than everybody else outside of the general ecosystem of tech, and then also get it. Like the idea, if we could go back in a time machine to the last time we did this and like say things like, oh, if you think about it, Necro can get tech a lot cheaper than everybody else. I would have been like, well, I don't know about that. They have to like fight. And it's like, well, but if you're picking the right fights and you're being smart about it,
you can make it cheaper.
Right.
Yeah.
So just the reliability that people have demonstrated with like, oh, Necro can perform this well, this consistently.
Right.
A year ago, we never would have thought that.
Yeah.
But now it just seems obvious, really.
Yeah. Next up is the L1Z1X. This one was... L1 is so weird. We have a weird history with L1. Because, in our very first theoretical tier list, I was like, oh my gosh, L1Z1X sounds unstoppable.
Right.
Harrow just scared the pants off of me. And we haven't seen it be, like, that amazingly incredible. But it is still good. Everything about Necro is still very good. I said Necro. L1Z1X is still very good. Harrow is an ability uniquely designed to help you take planets, which helps with control objectives. Right. They have an amazing start because their Dreadnoughts have 2 infantry, which means, two capacity, so you can move that 2C4I around like any other faction could, with the added benefit of a sustained damage Dreadnought that you can upgrade to, not have direct hit be a problem. They just have all of these natural advantages that you can then upgrade to make even better advantages.
Yeah, and I would say their tech situation is just really easygoing.
Yeah.
Their start is fantastic. Their home system is very good. The 5 is a little bit annoying early game. The fact that it's not efficient, but besides that, like L1 is just such a good like meat and potatoes type faction. I would say their only real counter is Planetary Shield, basically.
Right.
That's the only thing that kind of nullifies their abilities.
Yeah.
And that basically nullifies everybody's abilities.
Right.
But then it's funny that essentially Planetary Shield is a problem, but then if they can overcome it, they get to steal PDS.
Yeah.
I mean,
they take it from you and you're screwed.
They're also, the thing about their abilities that I think maybe kind of like in a normal situation, like when you're playing with not people playing on a high level, is that sometimes it's, I think, difficult for players to make the most of Harrow and Assimilate.
Yeah.
Especially Assimilate, I feel like doesn't happen often enough. Whereas when you see somebody that is playing with L1 and they're creative and they see those opportunities, it's just really wild, basically.
Yeah. If Jolnar was a double S tier faction that like you could make the argument belongs on a lower tier faction, L1 is the A tier faction that feels pretty solidly A tier, but you can make the argument that they are just like they're just reliable abilities and not specifically natural objective advantages. But I just feel that that their natural advantages push them so much further that they can actually accomplish more.
I would say the 2 factions that we see get played the most in our tournament, and even in mock tournament games, I've already noticed this, is L1 and Barony. I feel like those are the 2 most often because they're just good at stuff. Dreadnoughts are the meat and potatoes of Twilight Imperium, and they are both the Dreadnought factions, basically. But L1 kind of over Barony basically has their Dreadnoughts start with more natural abilities that are easier to expand upon, whereas Barony's wild Dreadnought abilities, the tech path is rough. And it just feels like they're a little out of sync. We're not that we're talking about Barony yet, but it's hard to talk about L1 without talking about
you
Barony.
do have to compare them to kind of show what the differences you're
They're
talking
brothers.
about are.
They're like they're really 2 sides of the same coin faction-wise.
Absolutely. The last one on our A tier is the Emirates of Hakan. And this one is interesting because there's 2, I think, big points for Hakan, which is Hakan in the late game with Quantum Dando Hub node is a double S tier faction.
Sure.
When they have that they can just lock down the win, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. It's I'm sorry, you screwed up, and
there's a
they just win.
Potential, basically.
And if they spent the rest of the game like doing good trade, they're an A-tier faction, right? They're just like, oh man, I made money, I was good around the table, I have a good tech path, I was A-tier. Hakan also has that issue, though, of if the table decides to, the table can make you a B-tier faction.
Sure.
And I just think the biggest difference is in top-tier play, we don't see that. We don't see people completely shut down Hakan, because good players know how to take advantage of Hakan. They know to trade with Hakan and make it decently even trades to help boost yourself up. So I think it's more like a B-tier, A-tier player that decides to shut down Hakan. That's how you and I definitely felt even like a year or so ago, especially within the first year of us having TI. We were very much like, me especially, I was like, gut Hakan, don't let them get away with anything ever, and that does crush Hakan, but what you learn is that you didn't do anything for yourself, and that actually ended up hurting you.
Well, and also, I mean, in the last year, we have learned so much about the different style of players out there, and there are these like there are these like silver tongue players out there that basically like I can't imagine how you would shut them down. Like, because there are 6 people at the table, there's no way they're not going to convince somebody to trade with them and make it worthwhile because they're smart with their deals. And also, Hakan is one of those factions where like the more creative you are with their advantages, the wilder it can get.
Yeah, and bonus points for being the faction that is at the leading charge of all kingslaying opportunities. I mean, when someone else is about to win, Hakan is the one making like money or distributing all the stuff to stop somebody else. They get to slow the game down to then put themselves in the winning position.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hakan might be the wildest as far as I think your opinions that you could have on them. I think there are some people listening to this now that might be thinking like, oh, that's too low, and people thinking that that's too high. Like they are a very swinging faction depending on who's at the table. But I just feel like consistently, especially thinking about the data that we kind of got from our tournament, the first year of our tournament anyways, was that there are a lot of people that know how to play Hakan very well, almost to the point where it's like, depending on who's at your table, you might be like, no, we need to ban Hakan because I can't risk certain types of players having it.
Absolutely. So let's drop down into B tier. B tier is a step below. I would say this is our first big jump. Everything we've talked about so far, it was just like smaller leaps between each tier. But going from A tier to B tier feels like you've really taken pulled the rug out from under these factions in terms of how are they actually finding a win. So these 3 factions have reliable abilities. They can do stuff, but they don't have any things that just like obviously point to them winning games. At the top of that, and the one I make the least argument in that direction of, is the Yin Brotherhood. The Yin Brotherhood does have some control, huge control advantages, the ability to take stuff from each other. But their faction tech sucks. Their tech path is mediocre. Their start is fine. Their home planet is fine. Like they're all over the place in terms of like how they get going. But finding a win for them is either they're not on the map at all, or they're in that winning position, and what are we going to do to stop them? It's impossible.
I would say that the reason, we've made this jump now, we're kind of in the middle now. We're talking about factions that are less than amazing. And I think it's fitting that the first faction we're talking about is Yin, because the science of Yin, we've had a troubled history with this faction on the show, but a lot of the good play that we've seen on a high level with Yin has felt really anecdotal. And that generally it seems like when Yin does well, it's just a wild and crazy night. It's just nuts. And I think they just have this funny list of abilities that if somebody's smart and they have them and they recognize an opening, it can be deadly potent, basically.
Absolutely.
But those hurdles that they have to get through in order to make that happen, those are still there. Those still exist.
Definitely. You know what I would define this jump as between the top tiers and then now in this B tier and going below? Just looking at the factions we've already had so far, everything in A, S, and double S tier, their abilities and stuff are free. You just have it. And Yin is the very first example of your ability costs something. And every faction below here pretty much has an ability that costs you something. And that is the mark of well, that's not as useful, is it? It's not just free stuff. You have to recognize what it's going to cost you before you use that. That's like the absolute definition of why devotion is a questionably good ability. It's like it has a major cost. Indoctrination also has a cost. So if you can use those abilities well, yes, of course you can do amazing with Yin.
Right.
But it's you have to be on that level, and other players can find ways to shut you down.
Exactly. So there's more you have to do to kind of protect your own advantage when you're playing as somebody like Yin versus like basically any of the factions we've talked up to this point about. Next faction we want to talk about is the Barony of Lit Niv. Another meat and potatoes faction. Very good with some problems, basically, I would say.
Yeah, you mentioned it earlier, but that tech path thing can't be ignored.
Yeah.
They can obviously have a decent tech path, but the way I think of their tech path is it is a tech path that leads them to generic goodness.
Yeah.
You'll get Gravity Drive, you'll have Dread 2,
Right.
but like, what is all of that in service of? You haven't unlocked some new crazy hidden potential.
Yeah.
Whereas everything above, there's like a next level of what you accomplish when you do that perfect tech path. Barony is just like you're hoping to do the right tech path so that you can accomplish the tech path objectives.
Right. I think also the fact that something you brought up when we had a little back and forth about L1 versus Barony before the show started, and something you brought up that really struck me is. So Barony kind of has a lot of similar advantages to L1, but they are not automatic. They're like L1 has Harrow, obviously awesome ability, and always going to be kind of crucial. Like you can just imagine so many situations where like Harrow really made the difference.
Right.
Barony's kind of answer to that is their flagship, which can bypass planetary shield, which is awesome.
Right.
But
you have to build the flagship.
You have to build the
and
flagship.
You only have that ability in one hex on the board.
And
anyway.
generally speaking, I would say building your flagship is not a good thing to do at high level play.
Yeah.
Essentially, if you do not have the unveil flagship secret objective, you're kind of just putting a point on the board for somebody. Now, the counter to that is Barony's flagship is notoriously difficult to kill.
Yeah.
But
still there.
It's still there.
Yeah.
It's still possible. And the other thing too is, you can't secure it from direct hit.
Right.
So it's still something that
It's
could
still
happen.
dangerous, and that's the general theme with all of Barony's stuff is that like you can get the good thing, but like you got to get NES and Duranium armor to get the really really good power, and that's super out of the way.
Right.
And so all of their superpowers that they can accomplish are too out of the way to be competitive in a highly skilled 10-point game.
Right.
You fall behind too quickly.
And I think they kind of belong where we've put them, which is like pretty much dead center.
Right.
Because I think also similar to Hakan, Barony has a lot of wild potential. There are a lot of games that we have, and also we should say, we have probably seen Barony more than your average faction. So we have a lot of Barony data.
Right.
And I feel like the Barony data has essentially taught us, if things work out for Barony, they can pretty much put the whole game in a sleeper hold and just choke everybody out.
Right. They have a lot of wins, but they also have even more plays.
They have, many plays, many losses, and then like kind of an average amount of wins, I would say.
Right.
And it really just depends on like, did they unlock Super Barony, which is difficult?
Yeah.
And again, think about it, like contrasting them with L1. L1 has kind of unlocked all of its abilities from the beginning.
Exactly.
Barony, it's like, all right, we need to make these things happen. And skilled players can do it, but Tech Path is kind of a rough one. Like, getting around Tech Path is something that you don't want to have to do, basically.
Definitely. Last up in our B tier is one that I wanted to rate way higher. You wanted to rate way lower, and this was we found this compromise.
Well, but I think this is exactly, especially
I think this is where they belong.
With everything we just said about Barony, we're going to just transition very neatly
right into Isarl tribes. Isarl tribes, let's start with the very first thing, and this is the first thing that you sold me on, is their tech path sucks. Their tech is great, but their tech path is terrible. And that hurts in high-level play. That hurts very, very badly.
And I feel like we haven't said that enough on this show, because I remember even on the Tech Path episode, we were like, oh, Isarl's so fun. You go down green.
Right.
And it's like, well, going down green is not good.
Right.
Like, going down one color, recommending you go down one color is only going to work if you're Jolnar.
Right. You get 2 secret objectives that way. And that's it.
You're not getting any of the regular tech objectives. So we have to assume that a lot of the time Yssaril is going to have to play blue-green instead of just green.
Right.
And blue-green Yssaril, that doesn't sound as good.
No, it's
basically.
fine.
Yeah.
Basically, it's
Yeah.
B tier. It's
Right.
B tier.
We're not
And
saying they're
that's where
bad.
it ends up. Yeah.
We're saying they might be a tad bit
Yeah.
overrated.
Here's the other thing with Yssaril. Yssaril in lower level games, and especially like I think a lot of the games that I play, because Hunter and I are not S tier players.
Right.
I think we both agree we're like about A tier players.
Or B tier.
Yeah, we are fine.
Yeah.
We're pretty good and we're knowledgeable, but in
I'm like
practice,
bottom of the A tier. You're like top of the B
All
tier.
right,
That's
fine.
how we would do it.
So Yssaril has this issue of in top tier games, the surprises that they spring on lower level games, they're like, oh well, Yssaril started stalling nonstop and then just won in one round.
Mm-hmm.
A group of top tier players will see that coming a mile away. The second Yssaril spends a single action card on a stall, the whole table will look at them and go, Yssaril up to something, because we've seen the Yssaril trick before.
Right.
We know to now look for, okay, well, what possible secrets could they score? What things can they do? And they'll thwart it. It's like actually not that hard to stop an Yssaril if you're actually paying attention to them.
Right. Stalling is only really going to help you if nobody has figured out what it is you're going to do.
Right.
If you start stalling as Yssaril, but I can see and still have time to stop you doing your thing, then that's kind of it. And besides having a random action card draw that's solid, that's kind of it for Yssaril as far as like winning. And generally speaking, higher level players maintain a very action cards are a high priority in high level play. So
absolutely.
everybody has a lot.
Right.
The fact that Yssaril also has a lot isn't the wildest thing in the world.
No,
basically.
they do have more, and they've cultivated a nice deck. Obviously, it's never like comfortable just like attacking into Yssaril. You don't just get a free, victory in combat against the Yssaril, because they are going to have great action cards.
Right.
But that isn't enough to put them over the finish line.
Right.
That's the big thing. Is they are still reliable. They are still a good faction, but none of those things lead to like obvious victory.
Right.
Whereas I think in a lower level game, it feels like Yssaril wins all the freaking time.
Right. The fact that instinct training can kind of trump Yssaril, and we haven't even talked about extra yet, I feel like is a tell as to like where Yssaril is basically in it. Still good. Definitely not trying to say they're bad, but please don't overreact. I think we just got done. The B tier is us talking about, well, not Yin though. I think most people can agree.
Above,
Yeah. But Barony and Yssaril, I think, are two factions we had to talk to back that we just feel like are a tad bit overrated. And I use the word tad bit. I'm not saying like
beatsy.
Right. We're saying
well, again,
that
both of these factions were ones that you and I put in wildly different spots.
right.
You rated Barony way higher. I rated Barony way lower.
Right.
You rated Yssaril way lower. I rated Yssaril way higher.
Right.
And we found this middle ground because it is that kind of dynamic. Like, well, it depends on whose hands they're in.
Right.
And it depends on what the table lets them get away with.
I think they're just both factions that can have a good day. And you can imagine them having a good day pretty easily, but there's just like an asterisk or two attached of like, yeah, this is probably going to go pretty good, except if.
Yeah, right.
And then if is something that does happen.
Right.
So, yeah.
And that if is something that the other good players at the table are looking for.
Yeah.
They know to keep an eye on that thing to stop you.
Yeah, I definitely completely agree with the like Yssaral's tricks are not, they're not undefeatable.
Yeah.
And a lot of high level players are really good at reading each other and seeing what, things like counting up secret objectives, counting up what objectives you might. So the second you start stalling, or you don't even have to stall, people are much better at looking at just your board state and being like, all right, let's see what they might be going for, and can I anticipate that, and can I stop it? And Yssaril needs to kind of attack people with their defenses lowered because they don't know what Yssaral's going to do.
Definitely.
They depend on that secrecy, and that kind of goes out the window when everybody's really good.
Yeah. Let's get into the really complicated stuff.
Yeah, the fun tier.
We're going to start, we kind of said what is going on here, but we're going to start with C tier part 1, because there's two classifications of C tier, and they don't get to be two separate tiers. It doesn't get to be a C and a D tier. That doesn't make sense because of how these factions just operate.
Right.
So C tier part 1 is the underdogs. The
Underdogs.
factions that we routinely think of as being not very good, but then they do decently well. They can have good victories.
Yeah, I would say these are factions that overperform our expectation.
Yeah.
So we expect them to do really poorly, And I'm not saying they do amazingly well.
Right.
I'm saying they do better than we anticipate.
Yeah.
And I think for both parts of this tier, there's a certain amount of we're kind of playing around, and there's a little bit of uncertainty as to like what the answers are here, basically.
Right. And if anything, that's kind of what makes them C tier factions. Is it's like if you can't just obviously define what makes a faction great, obviously it's not an S tier faction.
Yeah.
That's the whole reason those S and double S tiers exist, is because you can just look at it and be like, oh, 0 in initiative. It's great.
Right.
But with these ones, people that try to say they're amazing have to make these weird, crazy dissertations where it's like, okay, I guess, like, yeah, there can be successes there, obviously, but it's not an obvious recipe for success.
So with this the first half of this C tier, the underdog half, it feels like the way that you need to approach these factions is really kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah.
It's not just leaning into their obvious skills, because there's a lot of they all have pitfalls, basically.
And leaning into their obvious skills will actually sometimes lead you down a really bad path. Let's get some concrete details here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the first one in our C tier part 1 is Embers of Muwat.
Now, I think that just surprised a lot of people.
That just freaked some people out.
Maybe.
Because normally we would put Muwat like bottom 4 factions, bottom 3 factions maybe. But, I mean, obviously part of this is painted by we saw Muwat crush in a game of last year's finals with the eventual winner of the tournament.
Right.
But that's one game.
That's anecdotal.
That's very anecdotal. But the point the lesson that is taught in that is in extremely high level play, no one is just gonna throw all their stuff at Muwat's first War Sun.
Right.
No one's sacrificing all of their fleet to try to take out Muwat's fleet because they know that's gonna be bad. So Muwat typically gets a chance to find its leg room, right? They get to sort of work it out. Now, they do still have a bad start. They have one unit that gets to take planets. So they have a hill to climb. But what we've seen with Muwat is then in that late game, if left alone enough, which often they probably are, they can then just start taking more and more table presence. They can just move in on people, and there's very little answer that other people can have.
Right.
And it's not that hard for a Muwat to hang on in the early game.
Yeah. I think getting Muwat set up obviously is like critical and very, very difficult. And I think we just have seen a lot of high level play where somebody understood like, hey, I need to make a kind of early risk here in order to set up so my mid game isn't horrible, basically. I would love to see more Muwat games, I think, at high level play, because I think there's a lot of potential there. God, my tummy hurts from saying all this nice stuff about Muwat. I still don't want to play them ever myself.
I think the big problem is we so often see Muwat in a prelims round of a tournament, and it's someone who doesn't knock it out of the park with Muwat.
Right.
And it's because Muwat isn't an obviously good faction.
Right.
But it's just that whole idea of you can get them online and do good things with them. But it really does take some very serious effort to make that happen.
I mean, I think it comes down to I think tech skips. I think it's like someone coming into it being like, I have a plan. I know what tech like obviously I need, a yellow tech skip or a red tech skip, at least a red tech skip. In order to get to Prototype War Sun 2, because I think that is like super essential for their late game.
Yeah.
And I think in your average casual game, that might not be as possible.
Right.
But I think somebody that's really good at mitigating risk and noticing when is the time to strike and things like that.
Yeah.
They are probably going to have more success with that, basically.
And then they're going to have a ton of firepower in the late game to pull off some wild stuff.
Yeah.
Next up in our C tier part 1 is the Extra Kingdom.
Yeah.
And this one was a tough one.
Right. They have way overperformed from, I think, what they should be in all of our like tournament data from this year. They were weird, and I feel like they are still a very popular pick.
Yeah.
In like in competitive play, which is odd. And I think honestly, what I kind of want to hang my hat on is just how good instinct training is.
Yeah, it really does just come down to that.
It's just so good. It's such a potent late game ability.
But it costs something. I mean, it costs that command counter. It does. So if you have a bad command counter economy, you're in trouble.
Right. The other thing I would say is that Extra, if they prioritize trade, can be kind of a like basically scoring all of the like spendy objectives pretty easily, and maybe even like the high level spending, the stage
definitely.
2
They can definitely do
spendies.
16 resources, 16 influence stuff. The issue I always have with extra is I'm still convinced that the only time extra wins is if the control objectives were like already in their slice. They have to get like kind of lucky with objectives. And maybe that's not wholly true.
Right.
You can look at Unaligned Magi's win in the semifinals last year as extra, and he did some stuff where he got outside of his slice to go get some control objectives.
Right.
He stretched a little bit thinner, and I can't even define how he did it. But he did manage to find those and then had easy paths to all the spendy objectives.
Right.
So there are paths there, but none of it is intuitive.
Yeah.
None of it, the things that you should do as extra don't lead to wins.
Right.
So you have to find weird other workarounds with extra, and that is incredibly difficult to define and find. And so I think the players that find it are really good players that are working underneath the veil. You know, they're working and they're just making things happen while players aren't paying attention to them, and it is specifically because the other players don't perceive extra as a threat that they then find a success.
This tier in general is all about factions that we feel like have problems, but we have all of this weird anecdotal evidence of like times somebody made it work.
Yeah,
basically.
definitely.
And then our C tier part 2 is basically going to be the opposite of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think we saw a lot of really good extra play in the tournament, and I think if extra is playing really smart, they can overcome those things. It's a lot of the same stuff that we're saying about Muat.
Yeah.
It's like, so yeah, extra is not very good at control objectives, all right, but if you pick the right time to strike and you have the right action card in your hand, then
You can pull off a lot.
right. And it's really just like, are players able to make that work or not?
Yeah, I think the similar thing to Barony, where we talked about the flagship being kind of like it's good, but man, it's only in one spot.
Yeah.
Extra's thing is the same thing, except for their entire strategy is that. Their
that.
entire strategy is like the flagship's good. Where do I put it? How do I make that actually profit me in objectives?
And
how do
bad
I
tech
do that?
path. I mean,
it's
yeah.
it's not good.
I would say even worse tech path than yeah, I would actually. I'm going to go ahead and say worse tech path than Muat.
Yeah.
Because at least Muat, they start with a red,
Yep.
meaning if they can get some tech skips, they can eventually get to a really awesome tech.
Yep.
But they're still going to get another red. You know what I
Right.
mean? You're not going to get 2 red skips.
Right.
You're going to get one more red, and then, you know.
Yeah, extra is just all. I have the most complicated relationship in the world with extra, and I'm still trying to figure out our guide for them. And it's I just don't know how to write it. Like that is why that's why they're an underdog. Is because they're just this hard to define how they find victories faction.
Yeah,
like, that's always been true for them.
Yeah, those of you with you know what we haven't seen, a good like extra, like here's my extra deep dive personal guide.
I mean, that's what
I
I
would
want
like
to do.
see.
I've literally at this point now played extra probably like 15 times.
That's crazy.
Working on this guy for a year and a half,
Mhm.
like trying to figure out this extra puzzle, and it still escapes me.
Yeah, well, maybe it's diplomacy round 1. Anyways, next faction we're going to talk about is my buddies,
Your new friends,
my Sardak Nor.
Your new,
I love them. they're just fun.
Yeah, the bugs, the Sardak Nor are the epitome of underdogs.
Sure.
I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, they have this obvious tech path problem.
Worst start,
Worst
bad,
start you can have.
start.
And yet, if you can diplomatically find your way, I mean, literally, like listen to our recent Sardak guide, and you'll understand why we think Sardak is a C tier faction.
Yeah, actually, that's kind of it. It's just kind of like all of these Sardak idea, and that's the thing too is we have a way that we think makes Sardak better than a lot of people consider, and we're not even the only ones with our own ideas about it. Like what I mean is like Vaunt has this like very developed like here's what's good about Sardak, and it even disagrees with what we think is good about Sardak. And yeah, I think if anything, Sardak is the number 1 underdog faction. Yeah. Like I wanted Sardak to be even a little bit like higher in this tier.
Yeah.
And I was and this is a communal thing. But like I think they have okay, here's how I'll contextualize it. So like Extra and Muat have like more obvious things that are good like in the early game, in the mid game, and the late game. I feel like Sardak is more like, oh my god, that early game is
a nightmare.
And more of a nightmare than it is for those other 2 factions that we just talked about. But what they get if you figure that out is, I think, a more stable late game than the late game that you would have in a good extra game or a good Mulan game.
Yeah, definitely agree. Yeah, I think the big thing comes down with Sardak is you can do that reverse objective thing of like you focus on economy, then you focus on tech, then you focus on control objectives.
Yeah.
And that's cool, but boy, is that even harder to do in hyper-competitive play.
Yeah.
Because the hyper-competitive play is going to have locked down their control objective. They're going to find ways to prevent you from taking those control objectives, and that can be very, very difficult. So the players that I think have like a big like axe to grind with Sardak and people's perceptions of Sardak, where they're like, no, Sardak is actually great. We saw this last year with Evernoob. Evernoob wanted to play Sardak Nor in the tournament, and they had like a point to prove.
Yeah. That was the Statgate game.
That was Statgate, which is a whole separate thing, but the Statgate game proved that, like, yeah, Sardak was good, and he was in a really good position, but there's still plenty of easy ways to thwart a Sardak.
Yeah.
And when the players are good and know what to do to stop you, Sardak can do an amazingly well if you are the best player in your group. But if you are up against people all equally matched, they can hold back a Sardak.
I think it's telling that if we were to talk about two players that play, that either we have it on the record them playing Sardak and doing really well, or we have like somebody that just talks theoretically a lot about it, but we don't have a game on the record for them. Vaunt and Schroeder as two players that are like, oh no, Sardak is good. The thing that those two people have in common is that they are excellent above the table players. Right. They are meta players.
And you have to have that to accomplish it.
And it's weird.
Which means all you're doing is working against the things that Sardak is presenting you with.
Yeah, thematically it's almost like...
You're a better player than Sardak is a good faction.
Yeah, but... if you are a better player than Sardak is a good faction, you guys can team up in the late game. Right. You and Sardak as a faction and just have a blast.
Right. So let's get into C tier part 2, which is to say these aren't underdogs. These are factions that people even more will always say, this is a great faction. What are you talking about? These guys are awesome, and they're my favorite faction, and I love playing as them. And then we never see them win.
And then they underperform
pretty much ever.
Real bad.
And I don't think either of us are going to have great answers for why this is the case.
Right.
But they always underperform.
There's something wrong, and we don't even necessarily know exactly what it is. Yeah. Especially considering, I mean, just like so these are factions that we have like plenty of data on. Right. People love to play these factions. We just don't see them do well. Right. And I think we both have theories as to why, but we don't know for sure. First one we're going to talk about is Ghosts of Krius. Yeah. There is, I feel like, a whole, and I love Ghosts, by the way. Yeah. Like I have ever since basically this whole year, Ghosts has been like one of my favorite factions to play. Right. So I kind of get where people are coming from that feel this way, but there's this little cult, I feel like, of people that are just like, I'm a Ghost player, and I'm good at Ghosts, and I get Ghosts, and they have their own little attractive quality. Yep. So we get a lot of people that come into the tournament, and they are, they're projecting that they have this Ghost expertise, and then we just don't see it happen. It just doesn't happen.
Right.
And I feel like it has something to do with the fact that Ghosts, like, qualities are you're going to spread yourself thin, and I think spreading yourself thin is like the number one thing you can't get away with in high level play.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like it's literally like if you don't spread yourself thin with Ghosts, then how are you making use of the
how are you actually accomplishing things with your abilities?
Right.
It's another situation of working actively against what your faction is naturally good at.
Yeah. But so I also feel like maybe the reason Ghosts is here is because people talk about Ghosts in this way, and then we don't see the results. That also could be it. There could be like a meta thing happening. Yeah. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's what you're describing is exactly why I have issues with Ghosts, and why in our first round of faction guides, Ghost was like the hardest thing ever for me to write because I kept failing with them. I couldn't pull out a win with them because every time I would fall into some pitfall and it would all fall apart. And you described this earlier of so often we see a player come into the tournament and they're like, I'm a Ghost player. You all buckle up and check out how this Ghost game is going to go. And they get like a cool slice for Ghosts and they pick Ghosts, and then that's kind of the end of the story. Right. We don't see them do any amazing stuff because other players know how to get in the way of amazing stuff. They know how to... Tricky factions that rely on tricks don't succeed in high-level play.
Yep.
You need solid, steady successes.
That's
not just whimsical tricks. And that's what makes Sorrel and Mentak and Ghosts all fun is they can be so tricky,
Right.
but that doesn't win you games in high-level play.
Yeah,
you have to
people-
be conservative.
If part of the faction is they do tricks, then that has a lowered value in hyper competitive circles. I feel like.
Yeah. I just mentioned them, but let's talk about the other C tier Part 2 faction. It's the Mentak. Mentak is one where we've all seen the game where Mentak is pillaging like crazy and then gets mirror computing, and they're just this unstoppable force, and it feels ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
But we've also all seen the games where they never traded, they barely made any money, they couldn't quite get mirror computing because they had to focus on getting there were too many tech objectives, and they had to focus on that, and it's just a mess for them. Everything can just fall apart for Mentak so easily.
Right, and they're such a difficult faction to talk about in the context of this. But I at one point when we were preparing this episode, I felt like thinking about Mentak is sort of like, what if Hakan only had Quantum Data Hub node?
Right.
And that's kind of how I feel about Mentak.
They have
sometimes.
no other advantages.
Is they have this tech that they can get to that's a little bit out of the way that really helps them score objectives in like a major way. But that's kind of it. I mean, Ambush is cool.
Yeah.
But Ambush I feel like merely makes cruisers viable.
Right.
Like as the meat and potatoes of your fleet. As interesting as Ambush is as an ability, and it is a cool ability.
Yeah.
It does feel like all it basically does in the end is it makes cruisers more viable at high level play.
Right.
Which is kind of, I feel like, a backhanded compliment a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, cool. Cruisers are a bit better for them. It's like, it's still not going to overcome factions that easily get to do your standard like
So many other
Dreadnought
things.
backbone.
Right. Yeah. Well, because it's just two shots with cruisers, and cruisers making up the majority of your fleet is like only middlingly good.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Ambush is just annoying. Pillage is just annoying, which means you always have a meta problem.
Right.
The players who talk about being good with Mentak are ones who are once again doing things the opposite. Like to play Mentak well, you have to not pillage like half the time.
Right.
You have to decide to just not use your ability.
I like the stuff Mantis does
Sure.
when he plays as Mentak. I feel like that's who we're talking about. Yeah. I think all of those are smart ideas. And if we had that awesome Mantis Mentak game where he did a bunch of unconventional stuff and won decisively, then Mentak would probably be in the same tier as Extra and Sardak.
Here would be
And
my
Muad.
biggest. Here would be my biggest point is, Mantis can do very well with Mentak, but is Mantis gonna pick Mentak in the finals of a tournament?
He
No.
didn't.
He didn't, and he won't. So yeah, I just don't. The players at the top tier know that, like, okay, yeah, I can find successes with that faction if I have to, but I'm not going down that route if I don't have to.
Right.
The other thing with Mentak is that we were touching on it, but the mirror computing thing is, like, of course mirror computing is a great tech, but that's a huge tech path problem.
Right.
It's the same problem as a Sorrel.
Right.
4 yellow is in not the direction of anything.
Right.
I mean, you start with the ability to get PDS2, which is kind of not in line with like what you really are doing with your faction in the first place. It's just there's no clear direction. There's no clear answer on what you're supposed to do. This Mentak is a perfect answer of something's wrong.
Right.
This C tier 2 is I don't know why, but like their stuff just doesn't coalesce into like a good successful faction.
Yeah, it also, I mean, it could just, there's a meta problem, I think, with the fact that Mentak is going to disrupt other players' deals, but also like has mirror computing as an option.
Right.
Like I think strong players just like they're going to play against that pretty hard.
Right. Yeah,
They're not really going to allow that.
Right.
But yeah, I totally invite some pro player to like play Mentak and do all this
And
unconventional
show us
stuff
the
and then
right way.
and then that would bump Mentak up. We just don't have it.
Right.
That's literally the only reason Ghost and Mentak are in part 2 is because we don't have any anecdotal evidence of them being really good in certain situations.
And before we move on from this C tier thing, I want to be very clear that I see these two tiers as beside each other.
Yeah.
I can't call Ghost and Mentak worse than Muad, Extra, and Sardak.
Yeah.
They just operate alongside each other, and that's what leads us into the F tier. So don't come at me being like, how can you possibly put Muad above Ghosts? Because we didn't didn't do that. We nailed it.
Right. That's true. But also, there's not that, we don't want you to think that there's like a huge gap between C tier part 1 and C tier part 2.
Right.
Like there isn't. That's
There's
why we
no
label
gap.
that.
It's they're
now
adjacent.
Speaking of huge gaps, though, I think there's another big jump down to our final tier, which is F tier. These are factions with major hurdles and fart noises.
And big, stinky fart noises.
And you know who it... I mean, it's Winnu and it's Arborek.
Yeah,
it's both of those.
But the shocking revelation...
It's not shocking. This is not shocking.
The shocking revelation is who we've decided is in the lead.
Oh, I think Winnu has it a little bit better than Arborek these days.
Which
That's how I
is
feel.
weird. But let's break that down. We're going to just talk about Winnu and Arborek together, because we all know why they suck. They have terrible home systems, they have bad starts, they don't even have enough money for tech round one, they don't even have enough units to expand well round one. It just stinks.
Yeah.
So the argument you make for Arborek is, if you can avoid the problems, similar to like Muat. Muat has kind of a bad start, but if you can get everything online, they're really great in the late game. Arborek has that quality, except for what does Arborek's late game success look like? A ton of units.
Yep,
on
lots
the
of
board.
plastic.
Lots of plastic. Cool. What does Winnu's success look like? If Winnu doesn't get bothered, if Winnu is able to accomplish the things they want to accomplish, it's points.
Yep.
It's they got to Mechatol, they were uninhibited in that endeavor, and now they're parked on Mechatol and starting to get points.
Right.
That's hard to do. We're not saying that's an easy thing to accomplish.
Right.
But the two things with these two factions, if you overcome your major hurdle, one of them gets points, the other one still has to find out how to get the points. Yep. And so Arborek is our kind of dead last competitive faction.
It's interesting because I think they're both very Mechatol-based factions. Yeah. And I just feel like Arborek has the Achilles heel of like, they can pile a bunch of ground forces on there, and then somebody plays Plague, or like the table cooperates to get rid of them, and we've just seen it happen too many times.
Right.
Whereas Winnu's like, they go for Mechatol and then they get kicked off of it. Winnu has like a built-in like, I can get back onto Mechatol easier.
Right.
That's really it. It's a pretty small thing.
Yeah.
But still, Winnu slight edge
barely,
this year.
Just this year for now. Winnu has
year
the
for
slight
now.
edge. They're both in the bottom dumpster. They're just in the pit.
Right.
But Winnu is just barely standing on top of Arborek's toes.
It's like staying with the logic of it. We don't expect Winnu and Arborek to do well in competitive play, and they haven't.
Yep.
There is one game
where Winnu
won.
There are no games
The
where
Winnu
Arborek
Winnu.
won.
The Winnu was a very cool game,
Chicken
and
dinner.
it was fun to watch. Yeah. And it was Space Wizard who won that game, who was the Winnu.
But that was the only time.
That was it. and that game was very crazy.
Yeah, very crazy. We also have evidence of a great Arborek player. We love Jimbov. We've seen Jimbov in 2 tournaments as Arborek do incredibly well. Neither time could he find the victory, though.
Right.
And that is telling. And that's like in no way discrediting Jimbov. He did like everything he could do with that faction, and still came up short because Arborek is just so hard.
So here are, and I like, one thing I like about doing this episode is it feels like we're kind of throwing out some potential goals for random people in the coming tournament.
People who are looking to come into the tournament and maybe don't want to just win, but want to do something crazy.
Yeah. So obviously, if there's a second Winnu, there's Winnu Part 2, Electric Winnaloo.
Right.
Then we will remember that game forever.
Yes, yeah.
If you win a game in the tournament as Arborek, we will remember that game forever.
Yeah, that'll be like the first Arborek win I've seen.
If you win as Ghosts, we will probably remember it, and it will probably be very informative into the next tier list.
Yep.
Mentak, same story.
Yep.
I would say these are the 4 factions that were real. And still, if you want a Muat game, if you want as Muat, we would probably be like, wow. And Sardak, Extra, not so much. Extra is just so weird.
Yeah, I don't get why Extra wins.
All of the back half factions.
I refuse to accept that Extra wins.
Right. I actually think there might be a world where Extra is actually a B tier faction and we are just not good. Stat wise, they should be. It just doesn't make sense to us.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was this year's tier list. That was the 2019 tier list. I'm really excited to get a bunch of data.
Definitely.
Look at how these factions play out in the next tournament.
Yeah, I'm curious how the new format will change up the data.
Yeah,
because this one leans way more into selection order and things like that. Last year, I mean, the data is kind of off the rails because we have one set map, but then everything else has sort of semi-random things to it. Whereas this one is like it feels way more baked in.
Right.
What the approach to the draft is. So I'm excited to see what that data comes out on the other side looking like.
Yep. All right. Well, that is the first part of the episode. And for the second part of this episode, we have basically a bunch of announcements.
Yeah.
Very, very cool stuff. This is a very I would call this kind of the shareholders meeting
Yep.
part of the episode where we talk about going into next year and what our hopes and dreams are.
Yeah.
First thing I want to talk about is the show,
Yeah.
Space Cat Space Turtles. It's canceled. This is the last
Oh,
episode. Bye. Just
no.
kidding.
Why didn't you
Just
tell
kidding.
me?
I'm joking. But we want to kind of change the structure of the show
A little bit.
bit.
Not even just we want to. We kind of have to.
Yeah.
We're getting to this critical mass.
So we're getting to a point now where we're looking at the year, and there's 52 episodes we do a year.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first time, that doesn't feel like enough episodes.
Yeah.
Like it literally feels like we need
Right.
more, because we have this weird mixture, and I think we were comfortable with this for a while, but now it's kind of changing.
Yeah.
We have this weird mixture of like a lot of very deep strategy heavy episodes.
Right.
And then kind of the more meandery, fun,
Yeah.
theory crafty, all over the place episodes. And we want those things to be married. We want those things to go together. So essentially, as far as the show monthly, the first episode of every month is going to stay a Galactic Council episode. And those are going to get, we are going to make sure that we are always doing that first of the month.
Right.
Because we want this show to still have that kind of fun, exploratory
Well, we're going to
vibe
be better
to it.
about getting ahead of those things. Too.
Yes.
Because you're full-time, you can get those polls out a month ahead of time. There will be more conversations going on throughout them, rather than it being like it's Thursday, Hunter and I are recording on Saturday. Let's get a Galactic Council poll out there.
Exactly.
We're going to be able to step away from
We're
that
not
problem.
doing that anymore. Essentially, the way Galactic Council episodes will work from now on is we'll vote on them. The council will vote. I'm probably going to do 3 choices based on whatever the Galactic Council is talking about at the moment, and also just ideas that we have that we think are good. There will be 3. The choices for the next poll will be announced at the end of the episode for a month ahead. So there will be a whole month cycle with Galactic Council episodes that will, I think, make them it will just give everybody a good opportunity to actually use their privilege in voting on that, which I think is important.
Well, and my favorite thing about Galactic Council episodes is they always end up being topics that you and I wouldn't have thought to cover, whether it be something we thought was so basic that didn't need covering, but then because it was kind of put in our faces, we were like, oh wait, there's a lot to actually, the agenda phase strategy thing here was one I don't think we would have ever thought to cover, but then we did it, and that was
very fun episode.
A very fun episode, and one that lots of people downloaded that one because that's actually very useful information. So I think we require Galactic Council episodes from you all because we need to know what things we haven't touched on. What are we missing? Because Hunter and I don't know every single thing we need to talk about.
Yes. So I also want to encourage people that are Galactic Counselors, or if you become a Galactic Counselor, to continue proposing episodes in that channel. That is kind of the purpose of that channel for you to
don't
say
wait
hey,
for us to put out a request for topics.
Yes.
Just that's where you go to throw out topic ideas.
Yeah. And I'm planning on paying close attention to how certain topics perform in polls.
Yeah.
If it's a really close one between 2 topics, I might let the next topic fall into the next poll. But what I don't want to do is basically because this is what it felt like. Galactic Council episodes kind of felt like we had this long list of episodes.
Yeah.
And we were just going to slowly cover them by order of popularity until we were eventually doing the not very popular
Homebrew
ones.
got 3rd or 4th place a dozen times, and that's the lesson of hey, guess what? Turns out we don't need a homebrew episode.
Right, turns out
if you all want the homebrew episode, vote for it, but it's not going to happen.
And there will be, I guarantee you, there will be a point where it feels like it's the right time to do it. That's all it is.
Yeah,
it's just about timing.
Yep.
It's just about when
do
is it
people
time to talk
care?
about homebrew?
Yeah.
And it just hasn't been that time yet, but I guarantee you it will happen. So what about all the other episodes every month? Well, we want them for a while, and I mean there will be points where I think the structure of the show is going to be lots of strategy heavy episodes where they're either guides or overviews relating to TI, Dune, and even Root.
Yep.
All 3 of those. And the way a single episode of that will be structured is that there's going to be a main part of the episode where we do either a guide or an overview.
Yep.
And then a smaller segment.
Yeah.
So let's say it's a Dune episode. One thing that I don't want this show to be is that it's a lot of different audiences that don't care to overlap.
Yep.
I don't want that.
Yeah.
So
that's not fun.
if it's a Dune episode, you can expect that the smaller segment is probably going to relate to Twilight Imperium.
Right.
So imagine our big long discussions, our hour-plus discussions devoted to whatever the primary game is.
The Harkonnen Guide.
Yeah.
But then the Harkonnen Guide on the back end of that is now going to have an added segment of like, hey, we're going to still talk about some TI stuff. In this next month, it's probably going to be a lot of like, let's get some guides done, but then let's have a section of the episode that's talking about all the tournament action that's been going on so far.
Oh, yeah, because it's good to mention right now, like, the goal is for this weekend to be the first weekend of the tournament.
Yeah.
Now
it's
going to be
Dickens.
It's going to be a shaky start. I guarantee you, it's not going to hit the ground running.
Yeah.
But there's definitely going to be something to talk about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would imagine probably for the next couple months even that a lot of the tournament discussion will be relegated to this smaller segment.
Right.
Oh, and then so imagine basically the way episodes work from now on is there's this main strategy chunk that just gives you just the really, really good Space Cats content.
Our favorite stuff to write.
Yeah,
too.
our favorite stuff to write. And honestly, the stuff that's harder for us to do.
Yeah.
Like we want to make it where the show is just always the hits, the stuff we really like.
Right.
And then smaller off-topic segment that lets us like get a little loosey-goosey, and then ending with errata. Errata is not going anywhere.
No,
that is our mailbag section of the show that basically never stops. And that is we live and die by that section of
definitely.
it. Now we need to talk about the Patreon structure.
Yes.
Because it is about to get a very big overhaul. I would say everything you're about to hear is 95% final, in that maybe small parts of it will be edited in between the recording of this and the actual. We plan to launch this January 1st,
right?
Where it's like the new year kicks in, and then here is what the structure is now.
Right.
All right. So going into our Patreon structure, we're going to start with the first tier, our Patreoners. Not changing that name. Never will change that name. They are Patreoners, and that's how you say it. I'm just going to kind of read. This is an overview of each tier. So the Patreoners essentially backbone of the show. Huge difference I feel like the Patreoners make. So many of our patrons are patrons, are Patreoners, and we're changing this tier to be all about pre-errata.
Yeah.
Essentially, the Patreoner text channel on our Discord will be, here is next week's episode.
Yep.
Do you have anything that you want to throw at us before it even comes out, with the idea that you are sort of helping us build the script for the episode, but also that you will get the credit for that point.
Yeah.
This is not like, oh, we wait till the errata to credit you. This is literally in the episode. If we use one of your bits, like we have in the past, we've kind of gotten
about
into
Ensign's cheesy bread and the Barony Guide.
Yes.
He had such a good point to talk about. He got an entire segment of that guide.
Right.
It won't always be that big, but yeah, if you've got such a great nugget that we hadn't considered at all, we will make sure you're included in that.
Yeah, and so also that is what the Patreoner text channel will be devoted to.
Yes.
So every week you will hear, hey, here's the next thing we're going to cover. Do you have your thoughts? Like, share them with us.
Right.
And then, you get credit. That's cool. Galactic Counselors are essentially staying the same. We actually sort of already covered everything that's kind of changing with Galactic Counselors, which is to say that it's pretty much the same tier.
We're going to get more consistent with it.
Right. Oh, and also I should be mentioning, like, it's not like the prices are not changing. Patreoner is $1. Galactic Counselor is $5. The next tier is a pretty big changing one.
Yes.
Because I'm changing, so I'm kind of taking control of the next tier, and I'm changing it from the Steve Martin fan club because that joke is old, and that Steve Martin poster isn't even up in this room anymore. It's gone. He got rid of it. He did. That's how much we don't care about Steve Martin anymore. And also, you know what? Just to throw a little bit of shade, we had people tweet at Steve Martin for years.
Yeah.
And he never
ever once responded.
He never responded. It doesn't seem like he cares about Twilight Imperium that much
anymore.
We can't say. He might like it.
Yeah, but he hasn't been in the scene.
And he just won't even say hi. And I think it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
So we've decided to rename our third tier from the Steve Martin fan club to the Hunter Donaldson fan club. Hi, I'm Hunter
Everyone's
Donaldson.
second favorite comedian.
Your second favorite, because we couldn't get Steve, and we were talking about the people that we had, and we were like, well, we could ask me.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know. And then I asked me, and I said yes.
Okay.
So 100 Awesome Fan Club, if you're in the 100 Awesome Fan Club, you are the main producers for all SCPT video content. It is going to be a completely video-themed tier. Club membership will provide you special access to every stream and our back catalog starting in January of 2020.
Yep.
So essentially, as I have been getting more and more into video content, I've learned that not everything that I record is worthy of being preserved in amber forever.
Right.
However, they are all games, and for those of you that really like to watch Twilight Imperium, you will have access to everything that I record. I'm going to put it in a folder that you will be giving access to, probably through Google Drive, I think, is probably the plan right now, but you will have access to it. Members will also be giving access to their special Discord channel for the Clubhouse, which is the same as now, but you will get to vote once a month for a game for me to play on Twitch live, and I'm going to be giving a Friday night to this. So one Friday night when basically all people are available to watch, I will basically play whatever you want. I will play a Franken game of Twilight Imperium because they do those on Friday nights, so that's probably something that will happen.
That'll happen a lot, yeah.
I'll also play like anything. I'll play whatever. It's like a Galactic Council episode, but it's me playing a game live.
And there are obviously limits to this. We can't go track down some 18xx game that is like a rarity.
Oh yeah, I have to be able to get it.
Yeah, it's got to be stuff that can be done with relative ease. But yes,
I would expect it to. It's going to work a lot like Galactic Counselor episodes work, in which if you're in the Clubhouse, you can basically propose whatever you want, but I will kind of like
make the right.
I will make the right choices and give like, all right, here I will do one of these three things for this Friday. And then obviously, if it's good, it will end up on the YouTube. If it's not, it will end up in the folder where you will have access to. Well, you'll be able to get it.
And
forever.
Can we define good a little bit more too? Because I don't want people to get offended if they've ever been a game with you and then you didn't put it on YouTube. I don't want them to think like, well, we think that game was trash.
No.
It's that we really want the YouTube stuff to be these like. Especially, we want them to be games that people come and look at and are incredibly encouraged to join our community. Those games are for outsiders.
Right.
So the Steve Martin Fan Club is if you're an insider and you just want to watch games. You just want to be a part of every game that happens.
Right.
But the ones that are on our normal public YouTube are like, they can't just be like a stream of TTS because like that turns a lot of people away. Actually, it's not inviting for new players to not have any idea what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you guys should have a little sympathy for us in that doing video content of Twilight Imperium is very tricky because I think there's probably a lot of people that listen to the show that are like, I'm not going to watch a whole game of Twilight Imperium that I'm not playing.
I don't do that.
Yeah.
When other people stream, I don't watch all of your stream.
Right.
Like, I just don't.
Right. And some people do, and I think the 100 Donaldson Fan Club is for that, and it's also for getting me to do stuff on a Friday night.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is super cool. That tier, how much does that one cost? 10. So that is our $10 tier.
Next up is the Good Yin Brotherhood,
Yeah.
which is the 25 tier. Very little change there, except for the framing of how we're putting it. Because you all are amazing, and there's more and more of you in the Good Yin Brotherhood every day. And that makes it to where we just need to make sure people understand that we can't guarantee you a game that we will play with you on Tabletop Simulator, because that would mean that we would have to play literally like every other day constantly to get all those games in. But what it is the Good Yin Brotherhood is always approached first.
Yes.
If we're playing a game with people in the community, we never just jump on the Tabletop Simulator Discord and like try to find players for a game. We always start with the Good Yin Brotherhood. And then we honestly, from there, we work our way down. We always go Good Yin Brotherhood. We give it a day or two or whatever amount of time of lead up we have. Then we hit up the Steve Martin Fan Club. Then we hit up the Galactic Council. But if you want that first access to get in on games where you play with us, it's the 25 tier Good Yin Brotherhood.
Right. We also plan games with the Good Yin Brotherhood like ahead of time. So like generally, if we're going to go to the lower tiers, it's because we're looking for someone to fill gaps. Yeah. But yeah, Good Yin Brotherhood games will basically stay the same. I will say that if you're thinking about joining the Good Yin Brotherhood, most of the time these games are played on Saturdays or Sundays during the day by U.S. time zone type stuff.
Right.
Obviously, trying to play Gideon Brotherhood games while the tournament is going on is really tricky, but we still will make it happen.
Right.
So yeah, Gideon Brotherhood is like probably my favorite tier of the Patreon,
sure.
and there was basically nothing that we felt like we needed to change, except for we just felt the wording was strange when we were saying like every 3 months we'll play a game with you. It's mostly that you will get access to playing with us more often than once every 3 months.
Right.
Like if
There's
you're
plenty
paying
of Gideon
attention.
Brotherhood members that we play with them like once a month.
Yeah, we play with Gideon Brotherhood people basically all the time. It's just more about like, are you available, basically.
Right.
And then the next tier, this is the troublesome, interesting tier.
Yeah, there's a conversation that has to be had here,
Right.
basically.
I will. Also, I just want to make sure I'm keeping up with the prices. Gideon Brotherhood pricing isn't changing.
Nope.
It's $25. It's been $25. It will be $25. Next tier, Space Kitties, same price, $50. And also, if you kind of keep with the theme, after Galactic Counselor, 100 Awesome Fan Club, those the people in that tier are basically like video producers. Gideon Brotherhood, I like to think of them as like cast members. Like they're like in the cast, they're part of games, they're on, they appear on stream playing.
Absolutely.
And then the Space Kitties are like associate producers. So we've changed this one quite a bit. And let's just go ahead and talk about the problem outright.
Yes.
The problem was when we made the Patreon, we made the Space Kitty thing, we didn't think many people were going to do it. If anybody.
When Jada Pake was the very first one, and it blew our minds.
Yeah.
And then when Billy came around, it was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
How is this possible? Like, and it has only ballooned more and more from there.
Right.
So it's a similar problem to the Gideon Brotherhood, which is like the best kind of problem we have is like you are all anxious to get in on this stuff.
Yeah.
But as we said earlier, we only do 52 episodes a year.
Right.
And now we have literally more space, like every single episode would be a Space Kitty. If we wanted to catch up on like our backlog of Space Kitty episodes, we would be doing nothing but Space Kitty episodes through the entirety of 2020.
Yeah. So and we're not trying to get out of any, like we promised them that. So that is law, but we can't promise any more people that basically. So the idea of the Space Kitty episode, it's not like we're never going to do episodes like that anymore. It's that we can't just have that be an option that you can opt into to where we basically owe you that. Because there's only 52 episodes a year. There's only 52 weeks a year. We literally can't pump out this show fast enough for y'all.
And they are routinely hard to organize. We have to get with people that maybe don't have recording equipment and get our schedules all to align. Hunter and I, two people, it's easy for us to schedule to work with our schedules. Adding a third person to the mix always causes a lot of hiccups, which means not only do we have to try to get these episodes out in a timely manner, but it's impossible to get them out in a timely manner. It is always, there are multiple Space Kitties where we worked on getting their Space Kitty done for like 4 months before we found an actual opportunity to do the recording.
Yeah. Now we've already talked to Space Kitties on the Discord channel about this by the time this episode is released. But I just want to say it here, if you're listening and haven't seen the Discord yet, if you are a Space Kitty, essentially you're going to be given a choice of like, you can either still get your Space Kitty episode, because we promised you that. We're going to get you that. With just the understanding of like, it's going to take as long as it takes, but we'll get it done.
Right.
Or you will get access to a new tier that is actually above the Space Kitty tier. And I don't want
free admission to the new tier. Basically, a one-time subscription to the new tier for free.
Yeah, so you can essentially, those are your choices, basically, and we will work with you to figure it out. So if you are a Space Kitty, check out the Discord, send me a message, and we'll talk to you about it. But I should actually outline what the new Space Kitty does entail, because it's not like it doesn't entail anything.
Right, it's still good and fun, but it's different.
It's a completely different thing now. So Space Kitties are the associate producers of Space Cats Peace Turtles. As such, each Space Kitty is credited at the end of every episode of the show while they are a kitty. We will reach out to you to ask how you would like to be credited. As associate producers, you will be given access to every single episode outline of the show for life. I'm just going to let you have this access where you basically get to see all of our behind-the-scenes stuff, and I'm never going to delete it. If you do it once, I'm just going to add you to it, and then there you go. This access includes every old episode of the show and even new episodes that are in development. This access includes access to our production calendar, so you can see all of the episodes that we have in development in the future.
Yeah.
So you basically get to see the whole scope of the show. You basically get to see every single thing that me and Matt see.
Right.
And each year, this is the big thing. This is the different thing. Each year, we will be awarding our Space Kitties with an official Space Kitty swag. We are... Essentially, this is my way of backdoor announcing that we are getting into merch,
yeah.
And we are integrating it with the Patreon. So for 2020, if you're a Space Kitty at any time, we're going to send you... right now, I really want it to be a pin. It might end up being a patch. It's going to be some sort of way to display that you are a Space Kitty. Some sort of accessory type thing. We don't have it completely locked down. I am talking to someone that owns a pin company right now.
Right.
This, like everything else we do that is new, is the kind of thing where I'm promising you it will get done.
Right. We'll find a way.
We'll find a way.
We just don't know
and
it
this is for anyone that is a Space Kitty for all of 2020. You are going to get this thing.
Yeah.
I don't care if I have to bring it to you. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Right.
going to make it happen.
Right.
And yeah, so that is the Space Kitties. You're essentially getting an unprecedented level of access to us and everything that the show is.
The other thing that's not like as specifically involved, but has always been true with Space Kitties, is the Space Kitties chat is one where we definitely are very open with information about upcoming stuff. We always talk. We'll talk multiple weeks ahead of time about what we're thinking about doing, what topics are going to be coming up, and we're probably going to do even more of that now.
Right.
We will get if the Patreoners now have access to the information a week ahead of time. Space Kitties, it's like you get the whole calendar. You just know when everything's coming up, and get in there and talk to us and whatever. It is just that associate producer level of knowledge of just be a part of kind of helping us talk about the show. Also, the other small behind closed door stuff is like technically Space Kitties have mod access on the Discord. You help us pin, so you can pin stuff in Meme Town.
Yes.
There's all kinds of things like that Space Kitties are able to help us with. So you become just like a really integral part of the show and the community.
Right. All right. Now we have the new tier.
The new tier.
This is hopefully the goal with this tier is for it to be the actual very high dollar amount that
no one does.
Not everybody is doing, because that would kind of defeat the point. But we do. I think this is a good time to just say thank you to everyone that supports our Patreon, because it is ridiculous the amount of support that we get
generous,
through it.
And we know that there are those that want to do more. They're always looking for opportunities to do more. This isn't me saying I've gifted you with the opportunity to do more for us, but it is a saying like, if you really have been looking for more ways to get involved with the show, we're going to do that.
Right. So here's the thing. So we got rid of Space Kitty episodes. The idea of user submitted. What is this? A tool that listener submitted like segments is still a very attractive idea to us. It needs to be gated somewhat. We can't have too much of it.
Right.
And I also want it to feel more like. So one thing about the Space Kitties that I thought was weird was that if you give the $50 once, then it's like you get access to this episode, which actually feels like a big ask of us, and actually all the other listeners that like now there's this one episode that comes out that only relates to Space Kitty and what they wanted, basically. So I wanted it to be a little more integrated and also a little less about like, oh, you just be giving all the time. This is like you kind of give to this tier and then you get your stuff and then like you're good, basically.
Right.
So it's a new tier. It's called the Weird Bears, because I feel like it's our favorite thing that the show has is the Weird Bears. It's a $100 tier. The Weird Bears are our creative partners on the show. You will get the right to your own segment. Do you remember how I was talking about how the show is going to be a big segment and then a little segment? A Weird Bear can basically take that little segment and be like, here's my idea, here's what I want you guys to talk about. Once every time you are a Weird Bear, you'll basically get to see our calendar because you're a Weird Bear, you're also a Space Kitty. Each tier gets all the lower tier benefits. So you can see like, hey, they're going to be talking about this. I want to throw in this bonus segment that works alongside the episode, and we're pretty willing to stretch that. If there are some Space Kitties out there that are willing to be like, all right, I'm gonna get my free upgrade to being a Weird Bear once to be able to do this Weird Bear trick. We will probably be a lot looser with that requirement for you. Like if you're like, all right, I basically want to do my Space Kitty episode, but it's a short segment. It's a short segment, and then that would be fine. That sounds perfect. Another big part of this Weird Bear thing is a shirt. We are going to get into, again, so we're getting into merch for the Space Kitty swag. For the Weird Bears, there's going to be a yearly
official Weird Bear shirt.
Official Weird Bear shirt.
The pin might be like the idea with our merch, which we don't have that shop up yet.
Right.
But the idea with the merch is like there's going to be merch that anybody can just go and get. But there's going to be some exclusive merch that nobody gets unless you've done the Space Kitty thing or the Weird Bear thing. So there's going to be a shirt that is 100% exclusive to Weird Bears. It'll say like Weird Bear on it or what. Like it'll be your thing. It'll be your special thing because you're part of the most our favorite people in the world.
Right. And so it is essentially your opportunity to get some input on the show, and you also get a shirt.
Yep.
And please don't break the door down on that tier because then it will be like the same situation. But I don't anticipate that happening.
Definitely not.
And also, like, part of why I wanted this tier to exist is because I wanted to be able to offer the current Space Kitties something more, basically.
Absolutely.
But yeah, in order to support it, this is the structure for now.
Yeah.
So any and all feedback on this,
please.
Yeah, totally give that to us. This goes live January 1st. There will probably be like I said, it's like 95% done. There might be a little change here and there. We will talk to you about it.
Absolutely.
And we will have, if you're hearing this, and you're a Space Kitty and you haven't seen the Discord yet, come check out the Discord because we will be talking to you about all of these changes and everything.
For sure. That was like kind of like a super rundown.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna just slam us through a basic rundown. Of course, we just talked about Patreon. Please join our Patreon. Please join our Discord. Get involved in the community. Be a part of all of this. The Galactic Counselors right now are voting on if you want to play our profile of the Nine of Spades, or if you want to do a mock draft of the 2020 SCPT tournament, or if you want us to just not talk about board games at all, and we can talk about our favorite media. Those are the three options right now for the Galactic Council. Everyone who's involved in the tournament, continue looking out for scheduling emails. They just kind of they roll out on a gradual basis. So don't expect a thing in your inbox January 1st, but be on the lookout kind of routinely. We'll be consistently sending out emails to get people in on games, especially prepping games for the weekends, but we'll find other opportunities to squeeze in games as well. The Holiday Spectacular and a bunch of stuff from this month of Hunter being in December is getting thrown up onto the YouTube, so be keeping an eye out for some Root games, some Dune games, the TI Holiday Spectacular, everything. So please keep an eye on our YouTube and be on the lookout on our Twitch for other games that Hunter's doing live.
I will say this, Holiday Spectacular, if you're hearing this episode right now, should already be on YouTube. Yeah. Uh-oh, Hunter, just locked you into that. Looks like you got it now, buddy. That's what you're doing on Monday.
So also, please rate us on Apple Podcasts and iTunes. It increases our visibility, gets more people playing TI, gets people playing Root and Dune, gets people involved in the show, and just makes for a better community all around. You can follow us on Twitter at SpaceCatsPod, Facebook, SpaceCats Peace Turtles, and join our Discord to get your Patreon perks. If you link your Patreon to your Discord through your Patreon settings, you can get access to all the important Discord channels we just talked about in this episode, but also the Discord is free for anybody. There's all kinds of other channels that are for anybody to get in on. So come, please just be a part of the fun. And then that's it. We did it.
And
we
then that's
finished 2019 with a bang.
That's it. We finished. The 2019 is done.
It's over.
And it's over. It's the 31st.
And we nailed it.
And we nailed it. We nailed 2019 because of our action card episode and this one. Everything else, honestly, a little sloppy. But action card episode, this episode, no prisoners. You know what I mean? I don't take them.
Thank you for listening to Space Cats Peace Turtles, and thanks to Ben Prunty for the use of his music. You can find more at benpruntymusic.com and benprunty.bandcamp.com. Pax Magnifica, Bellum Gloriosum.